so many people think that if they're going to have a vocation to the priesthood or the religious life, there's going to be one aha moment where they realize, yes, this is the confirmation I was looking for. Well, there is a moment like that, but that's when you actually are at your ordination and they tell you to come forward and be ordained.
Right. Was it Monsignor Bandis who was actually at the Second Vatican Council?
He was a peritus, which means an expert. So another famous peritus was Joseph Ratzinger, who of course became Pope Benedict XVI. And there were many others who went on to become famous theologians within the church. But we had our own right here of Saint Agnes. One of the few television programs I watch is Jeopardy.
Okay.
So I try to watch that most days unless
Really?
I've got an appointment or some other commitment at that time.
Are you going to be on one day? Can we get Ken Jennings to invite you, maybe?
I don't have any reason to think I'll be on there soon someday. I have auditioned for the show before.
No way.
But it's been a while.
That's awesome.
It's been a while since I've done that.
Father Paul Baker, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Neil.
So you are a veteran teacher now at St. Agnes, right? So what have the first couple of weeks of this school year been like for you?
The first couple of weeks of this school year have probably been my easiest so far because this is the first fall semester where I'm not teaching a new class. So my first year here in the fall, I taught New Testament to the sophomores. But then for the following year, sophomores, the order of the curriculum changed for theology. So I had to teach a new class that fall called Creed, which is a basic doctrine class. So now that there's been no more changes in the curriculum, I'm teaching that again. So for the first time in the fall now, I get to teach the same thing I taught last year, which has made this start to the school year a lot more enjoyable, shall we say. Not that it was horrible before, but just that it was a challenge to put together a new class again, but certainly a challenge I was capable of handling and very much glad to do.
Do you have to get into a flow of things yourself again as you start a new school year, or is it, especially now that you haven't changed your course that you're teaching for this year, did it just come naturally?
It was much easier this year now that I knew what to expect. Each successive semester has been easier than the last for the most part. So that's been a great joy. Now I feel like I can finally settle in and not worry about, did I miss that or not do this, those sorts of things. So now I can just know what it is that I'm doing and completely pour myself into it rather than having to worry about, have I done everything I need to do just to make class happen today?
Do you feel like the students are ready? Are they super energetic? When do you teach? Like, does it make a difference in the morning versus the afternoon?
I think, to be honest, it does make a difference what time of day it is. I've had both morning classes and afternoon classes, and I would say, and I think most teachers would say this isn't any commentary about the quality of student we have here, which I would say is excellent. Mm-hmm. But things are a little less energetic in the afternoon, or at least certainly the last period, which I teach this year. But I'm sort of right there with them, and I haven't been in class all day like they have, so I can only imagine how they feel by that point. But still, they're good students and they're attentive. It's just at that point the energy's maybe fallen off a bit. But I remember seeing those ads for that 5-hour energy.
Oh yeah,
I always talked about the 2:30 feeling. Well, that's the 2:30 feeling right there at 7th hour. So I understand where they're at, and I comport myself accordingly.
Do you feel that yourself too in the afternoon? Is there?
Maybe not to the degree they do because I'm not in class all day, but I would say generally in the afternoon, I'm certainly ready for a break at times. But it really does astound me how hard our students work, considering that they are in class all day, and then many of them are so involved in other sports and activities, and not an insignificant number live at some considerable distance from the school. So that's another aspect that adds to my amazement at what they're able to accomplish given in the limited hours in the day that they have. So I certainly wasn't that, was not getting after it as much as most of them are when I was in high school. So I feel good about the future when I see things like that.
Yeah. So you serve in 2 capacities here at St. Agnes.
Yeah.
Parochial vicar, right? Is that the church title?
Well,
Associate? Is that
to be completely honest, that is my one role, is what they call the parochial vicar. So that is the proper ecclesial term, the proper canonical term, which is, according to the law of the church. The parochial vicar is a priest assigned to a parish through whom the pastor can act vicariously, because the pastor can't be everywhere at once.
Right.
So since Father Ubel can't be everywhere, his presence is made known through my presence and what I do here at St. Agnes, which involves a variety of things. But a large portion of where he desires me to be present in his stead is in the school, and particularly teaching theology in the upper school, in this case to sophomores, and also being there for the sacramental needs of the school as well. So that is, I would say, a big bulk of what I do. But of course, it's a parish first and foremost. So I'm present at all the weekend liturgies, or if not all, certainly am present throughout the weekend liturgical schedule, both Saturday mornings, Friday evenings, or I should say Saturday evenings, Saturday confessions, and then our full slate of masses on Sunday. Even though I'm usually not saying more than 2 of those on a Sunday, I often help with communion at the ones that I'm not saying. And in addition to that, we also have Sunday Vespers, which I do about half of the time. So it's a very demanding weekend schedule compared to a lot of churches around. So there's certainly plenty to do here on the parish side.
Yeah, we've got you mentioned Vespers. I mean, that's, I would say, fairly unique.
That's not typical. What's interesting is that I think it might have been one of the documents of the Second Vatican Council, probably Sacrosanctum Concilium, but you'll have to look that up yourself.
Okay.
But it noted that, or a desire that parishes would have Sunday Vespers prayed. And St. Agnes, despite what some might think, is a spirit of the true Vatican II, and in accordance with that has sought to offer that venerable custom of the church to have a solemn Sunday Vespers. And for those who don't know, Vespers is the evening prayer of the church. It's something priests are bound to pray every day. Many religious do as well as deacons. That's not the only thing we're bound to pray every day, but it's one of the many things we promised to pray every day. Part of a larger practice in prayer of the church called the Liturgy of the Hours, which is the way the church seeks to sanctify the day, seeks to sanctify time outside of the Mass throughout the day. So this is what the monks had been praying, or still are praying, when they sit in choir. But as I said as well, priests are bound to pray it too. One of the wonderful things a lot of people don't realize is that lay people are very much encouraged and invited to pray it as well. So it's not just something for priests and religious, but it's the prayer of the whole church. And after the Mass, I would say, is the second best prayer you can say or attend to as a member of the church. And it consists mostly of praying from the Psalms.
Yeah, to me, it's always seemed like it's a great introduction to an opportunity for us to get more deep into sacred scripture, because there's so many more. There's the Psalms, there's additional readings, if you particularly, and on the office of readings, you have saintly writings and things like that. But there's just
you often hear people say, whenever I go to prayer, I don't know what to say. And I would tell them, well, the church has already thought of a solution for that.
Yeah, there you go.
The way you feel, or the way that you feel at various times throughout the day, is probably already expressed within one psalm or another. And even though the psalm you're praying that day might not be how you exactly feel at that moment, this is meant to convey the full range of human emotions and where the human heart is at various points throughout one's day or even throughout one's life. And even though you might not be feeling that way, to unite yourself to the prayer of the church and making that offering to God throughout the day and observing these prayers. Yeah,
you mentioned, the Second Vatican Council is like a buzzword today, particularly, that's buzzword phrase amongst Catholics and the proper implementation of the Second Vatican Council. But that's really, at least from my understanding, that's really how we view the ways in which we celebrate the liturgy here at Saint Agnes. We had, was it Monsignor Bandis, who was actually at the Second Vatican Council?
He was a peritus, which means an expert at the council. So the various bishops who gathered from all around the world, the largest council in church history. And the drafting of the various documents at the council, they were advised by what they called experts. And these were people, mostly priests, who were expert in some particular topic or another, who advised them in the drafting of these documents. So another famous peritus was Joseph Ratzinger, who of course became Pope Benedict XVI. And there were many others who went on to become famous theologians within the church. But we had our own right here of Saint Agnes. And this was, I think, before he was the pastor of Saint Agnes. But he was, or he might have been pastor at the time. I'm not sure. That's a Father Ubel question.
Yeah.
But he was, he certainly was pastor after the council until 1969 when he died in office.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So can you speak it a little bit more to some of the things that we do here that maybe that would be evidence of a proper implementation of the documents of the Second Vatican Council?
Well, one that I think is most obvious is one of the things the council documents called for was that in the liturgy, the use of the Latin language be retained.
Right.
And most of our masses here at St. Agnes are in English. A lot of people, I think, have this conception, if they've ever heard of St. Agnes, they think it's all Latin all the time, and that's just not the case. The council said that the vernacular could be used, and on our weekend masses, our Saturday evening mass, and then 3 of our masses on Sunday are all in English. Now, for all those masses, there are some parts that are sung in Latin, especially certain parts of the Mass that we call the ordinary, so those parts that never change. So, usually it shouldn't be too confusing about what we're saying once you get into the habit of doing it and, look and see, okay, well, this is what this means, and then it never changes. So you'll always know what it is you're singing or saying at that moment. But 2 of our masses on Sunday are entirely in Latin, or almost all in Latin, and that would be our 10:30 Mass, which is the Mass of Paul VI, the Mass that was promulgated in Advent of 1969, and then a traditional Latin Mass at 8 a.m. So those make use of the Latin language. So that is one way that we've retained the use of Latin here at St. Agnes. And even in our English Masses, I was saying, making use of Latin in those as well to help communicate, I believe, the fact that the faith is timeless and the faith doesn't change. And by using this language, we make it clear that we have this connection to the past, even though the apostles themselves may not have spoke or understood Latin well. This communicates the fact that our faith is the same faith that they had and is a universal faith that can be used across any language and culture, because we're using a language that no one speaks on a regular basis.
Did you feel pretty proficient in Latin before coming here, or has it been a steep learning curve?
I would say the thing that was a more steep learning curve was learning all the various gestures and the way of saying the Mass here, particularly the 10:30 Mass, was what took a little more practice. I had said the new Mass in Latin before privately, but it's still different doing it in person in front of people. So that certainly, and mostly sung too. So that certainly took some getting used to. I would say another thing that we've retained well here at Saint Agnes that the council documents called to be retained was Gregorian Chant. In fact, they say that Gregorian Chant holds the pride of place when it comes to liturgical music. And we certainly make use of that, certainly at our Saturday morning masses, which are the Mass of Paul VI in Latin, and then also our 10:30 masses that are outside of the orchestra season. So, and even during the orchestra masses at certain parts, they will make use of Gregorian Chant as well.
What would you say is a value of Gregorian Chant? Why is that worth retaining to you?
Because much like the Latin language in which it's sung, it is a piece of music that's timeless. It's music that's not meant to entertain, but meant to draw you to the contemplation of higher things. And so people will come away from it having a certain sense of peace and fulfillment, but at the same time not being entertained in a way that is often very fleeting. So it's something you can turn to again and again, and it will bring about the desired effect within you and within those who use it. So I would say that is the value of using a music like Gregorian Chant. It's timeless and meant to remind you that you're not meant for the music of this world and the things of this world, but meant for eternity. So it points towards that.
Yeah, we have, you've alluded to this already, but we have an abundant wealth of beautiful music here as well, from just our parish choir singing to our school masses when our school choir sings, Gregorian Chant, and then Sacred Polyphony and the Twin Cities Catholic Chorale Masses at 10:30. How do all of those different musical expressions, how do they come together to enrich our liturgies here, do you think?
I would say the way music is used here at Saint Agnes, it helps the people who come to worship here, whether they be our students at school masses or people coming to our weekend liturgies, our Sunday liturgies. It helps foster within those who come here to worship a sense of, not that I come to Mass to do something, to perform a task, but that I come to Mass to participate in a way where I unite myself to the liturgy. Our music we offer here is very liturgically based. It's not a band. It's not something that's meant to be entertainment. It helps to draw the worshiper into the act of worship. And that's the real value of the music here at St. Agnes. The word they would use in Latin is, it cultivates an attitude of Actuosa and versus Activa. Activa means that like I have to do something at Mass or I'm not really worshiping. Whereas Actuosa is an inward disposition that this music helps to create within the soul of the person who's there to worship, so that they can make that true offering, so that they're not just making some external act, but that their interior disposition is such that they can make an authentic act of worship here at the Mass and unite themselves truly to what is happening, which is the offering of Christ to the Father.
I think I've heard Monsignor Schuler, a couple of his talks recorded, and he spoke quite a bit about that.
You would have, I'm sure. I mean, I never met Monsignor Schuler, and I've not heard these talks, but That doesn't surprise me at all, given what I do know about him.
Yeah, kind of I can't remember the distinction. I'm not theologically minded enough. I don't think to recall exactly what it was, but it was sort of, I think, a description of the proper understanding of active participation on our part.
Yes, because this is one thing that the council calls for is active participation. But if you go and look at the Latin, what they're talking about is how to create more a sense of actuosa versus activa.
Okay.
One of the issues that we've dealt with post-council is a lot of people took that to mean more activa. The more people you have doing external things at Mass, the better. And I'm all for people wanting to support their parish and to be a part of their community. But we need to first cultivate, or what's ideal is that we cultivate this proper inward disposition first and realize that it's about being a certain way first before we do something. And that's one of the things that our music allows for well here, I believe, is it helps the worshipers to have the proper inward disposition.
We have a number of other ways in which we do liturgy that would be deemed more traditional, and that maybe somebody who's walking in might say, what is going on here? I think about celebrating Mass at Orientem. I think about our communion rail. I think about the beautiful Baroque architecture within the church. If somebody is coming to Saint Agnes for the first time and they've never experienced something like that, what would be your advice to them about, maybe even if it's just having an openness, if it's just taking it all in, taking a step back? Because I think sometimes, myself included, we can put a wall up when something's different, and we don't when we don't know what's going on. I think about the first time I went to the traditional Latin Mass, and it was just so it was a low Mass, so very quiet, and I just was like, what am I supposed to do? What is going on? But then as I went a few more times and starting to enter into it myself again, trying to keep an open mind about it, and really enjoy. I really have come to enjoy the quiet and just being able to be present and letting that be my sort of active participation, I guess. What would be what would be your best advice for somebody coming to check out a Saint Agnes liturgy for the first time?
I would say don't try to understand it all right away, and which I think is one of the things you were alluding to as you were speaking there. Because ultimately we call the liturgy, the celebration of Mass, the sacred mysteries. These are things that, while we certainly do know certain things about them, how and why they function are ultimately above human understanding. So it's something that we, by the grace of God, have to allow ourselves to be acclimated to. And if we come in with an attitude of thinking that we're going to understand or everything needs to be explained right away, we're going to not allow ourselves, I believe, to be fully drawn in by what's happening, and to realize that the real power in the Mass lies not in it being explained, but in it having the ability to change us and to save us ultimately. So if we come in with any sort of preconceived notion or desire to impart our own categories of understanding onto it, it's not going to be able to accomplish that as easily. And that's not to say that you won't come to understand. You will eventually come to understand more. But the more you'll understand, ironically, the more you'll realize that you don't understand. But at least you'll know maybe what certain gestures are alluding to or meant to dispose us towards. So a big one of these would be, I think, probably the most mysterious to people who come, other than maybe the use of the Latin language if they come to a Latin Mass, is the posture of praying ad Orientem. And that's when the priest is at the altar. He is facing the same direction as the worshipers. So he, like the worshipers, is facing towards the crucifix, is facing towards the back wall of the church, which is called the apse. And the reasons for that are many. One is that the priest is leading the people in prayer, because the priest among other things within the liturgy, represents the person of Christ, and therefore it's fitting when one is leading that they lead from the front. And it helps us to therefore realize the priest, through this prayer of the Mass, is leading the people towards God, as represented, of course, in the Eucharistic species, but then also even the figure of the crucifix. Another thing is that it is looking forward to the resurrection. So ad Orientem means to the east. Now, Saint Agnes actually faces south in actuality. But
come on, architects. What were we doing?
sometimes for architectural reasons, you can't always build a church facing east. But it's still spiritually or liturgically, it is facing east, which is the direction the resurrection will come from, because it is the direction the day comes from, the direction of the rising sun. So this reminds us that there's a dimension to Mass which is called eschatological. There's an eschatological dimension to Mass, meaning that this act of worship is meant to lead us towards our final end, is meant to lead us towards our salvation, our life with God forever in heaven. So it reminds us that the Mass is not celebrating about what's good here and now, although we can certainly do that, but ultimately about what God intends to have us celebrate in eternity with him. So it helps us to be cognizant of that our home isn't here, and that we are ultimately looking forward to something else, while still acknowledging, of course, the wonderful things that God has given us in this life as a sign of his love for us. And then another reason for ad Orientem is it helps us to be more theocentric, to be more focused on God. The personality and the facial gestures and mannerisms of the priest as an individual matter less, because the priest, like the people, is turned towards God in his prayer. So Father's personality, or whether or not you like Father and his mannerisms, is of a lesser importance, because he's ultimately not there for himself or for his own personality, but there in the place of God. And so with him facing the same direction as you, it helps you to focus more on that and not on him and his own proclivities and his own idiosyncrasies.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite thing about celebrating Mass, Father? You probably got a few, but what is there a moment during the liturgy? Is there, I've always been curious about that. Every priest that I meet.
One moment I've come to really enjoy here at Saint Agnes is both at the beginning of Mass and then during the offertory when we're using incense. And I've used incense at other parishes before too, so this isn't really anything new, but I feel it in a particular sense here at Saint Agnes that when I'm doing this, I feel as though I'm really a priest who's preparing the sacrifice for the whole of the church and the whole of this people who is here through the use of that incense, and also feel myself in a way to be in continuity with the priests of the Old Testament who burned incense in the temple at various times throughout the day. And obviously my priesthood is different than theirs. I'm a priest of Jesus Christ in the line of Melchizedek. They were just priests of Aaron, whose priesthood, was just passed from father to son and only lasted as long as you were alive. So certainly a qualitative difference, but still a continuity in the sense that this was the people to whom God had first revealed himself and given a priesthood, which, though their sacrifices were not efficacious in the way that the sacrifice of Christ is, still in a way was something that God commanded and which was done on behalf of God's people. And so I get the sense of myself being in continuity with that great act of the human race being able to make an offering to God, which rises up like incense and is pleasing in his sight. So that's something I often think about as I'm incensing the altar. Actually, that I've I'm one link in a chain of all this that has come before me and which will also continue after me, certainly.
You have a number of ways in which you're able to administer the sacraments to parishioners here, to students in the school. You know, we have a lot of confession times, particularly on the school side, where you and Father will just hunker down over in the confessionals for hours and hours at a time, hearing confessions. You know, you work with those who are entering the church, married couples, or couples preparing for marriage. What are some of those other duties that you have that, and maybe some experiences that you've had that have meant a lot to you since you've been here?
Well, it's always all those things you've done are enjoyable things to do. Hearing confessions is strange in that, on the one hand, I'm very glad to do it, and I do love being able to say those words of absolution over people. But other than that, I can't repeat enough how boring it is. By that I mean not that I don't want to do it but just that it's not exciting to hear people's sins. And I mean that actually as an encouragement to people,
right?
That you're not going to shock me or impress me with your sins, because I've heard everything before, and it's all, after a while, it's just all the same. And you realize how you're glad that people are there to receive the Lord's mercy, and you're glad to give them to it. And at the same time, you realized, this is why Jesus died, because everybody sins and everybody needs this mercy. So you're glad for that, but then you just realize there's nothing that interesting about sin, and that the interesting thing is when they get forgiven. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is such a wonderful moment, and I've been moved so many times to be able to do that for people. So that truly is a wonderful thing. And yes, I also do work with couples who are preparing for marriage. Father Yubel and I, we pretty much split the weddings half and half. So I usually meet with couples about 5 times before they get married, and that consists of doing an initial intake meeting to help make sure that there's no major obstacles to their marriage, which usually there isn't, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
And then you get to know them a little bit, and then you meet a few other times to talk about the theology of marriage, things like human sexuality. They also do something called a marital intake, which is a test where they answer a bunch of questions about them and their future spouse to see if there are any points where there needs to be some discussion about possible points of conflict or disagreement and things like that. And then I usually meet with them one last time to go over some things with the liturgy. They also will take an NFP class. They don't do that with me. They do that with somebody who knows about that.
Yeah, you're not a natural family planning
practitioner.
No,
I am not. I'm happy to leave that to other people.
Yeah.
And they also typically go on a marriage retreat as well, which is like a Friday evening and all-day Saturday event where they go through a lot of different topics about married life to help these couples at least have some conversations to ensure that certain things have been talked about and addressed before they enter into the marital covenant.
Sacraments are a big deal.
It's a lot of what I do is sacramental things. And in terms of preparing people to enter the church through the sacraments, I'll act as a liaison between people who want to do that in the parish, but the actual instruction, I will do sometimes one-on-one if group instruction isn't available for them given their situation. But for most people, they attend instruction at the cathedral if they're interested in coming into the church, which actually just started last week. So they'll attend those up until about the time of Easter and then come into the church, generally speaking, at Easter.
Do you have a favorite time of the church calendar year, favorite feast day, favorite, is it Easter? Is it the midnight mass at Christmas? Any particular Mass that hits home for you each year?
I would say a few. I would say I like All Saints' Day because that's the reminder of what God intends for us and what we have hope for as we're on this Christian journey here in this life, what the goal is. So I've got a particular affection for that day. And I'm always worried about what's the end of things in mind. Why am I doing this? And that's the reminder of I'm doing this to become a saint and to help other people become saints too. Because that's what All Saints' Day is about. It's not about the fact that it's not like a catch-all for all the saints who we know. It's meant more for those people whose names we don't know, who are in heaven, which will, for those of us who make it to heaven, will be most of us. And that this is not something for just people who will be canonized, but for everyone. So that's another reason I have affection for that day. And then I would also say the Marian feasts, with particular attention to the Immaculate Conception and the Annunciation, because it's the reminder to me that through his grace, God desires to work great things within us, but that we need to say yes to that. And that yes is, of course, aided by God's grace too. But on some level, we do need to make our assent. So the Immaculate Conception being, if you will, the grace which prepares us to do that great thing, and then the Annunciation, the appropriation of that grace, that saying yes to what God has given us the ability to do, and then the reminder of the great thing that comes from that.
We have a treasure trove here of beautiful vestments, sacred vessels. Do you have a favorite vestment that you wear when you celebrate Mass here?
My favorite vestment is actually one that does not belong to the Saint.
Oh, come on, no.
To the Saint Agnes collection, but is worthy to belong to the Saint Agnes collection, but will come with me whenever it is I leave here. But it's a vestment that my mother made for me for when I was ordained.
Okay.
And that is it's a gold fiddleback vestment. If you don't know what a fiddleback vestment is, it's sometimes called a Roman vestment. It sort of looks like a sandwich board, for lack of a better way of saying it, or maybe sort of like an apron. But it's not as full as what you would call a Gothic vestment, which looks more cloak-like. But it's called a fiddleback because the front of the vestment looks like the back of a violin. It's got the same sort of shape. And then the back is sort of more cape-shaped. And there's usually some sort of design on the back that's ornate, which is certainly the case with mine. It's a red velvet cross, and then in the center of the cross is the Lamb of God from the book of Revelation with the scroll with the 7 seals.
I think I know which vestment you're talking about.
And then on the rest of the velvet cross, there's a floral embroidery. So my mother spent many, many hours doing the embroidery for that and sewing the vestment, probably a few hundred hours doing all that. So she's very skilled at that sort of work. But even as skilled as she was, she had to take some classes to learn how to do some of the techniques required to make that. But she had asked me what I wanted, and for years at my home parish of St. Peter's in Mendota, there is on display in their social hall an old vestment in a glass case. I don't know the last time it was used. I remember seeing it when I was a little boy. So it's probably been a long time since that has been used. But they've had it there, and I said, well, I would want one that looks like that. So she actually took, with their permission, she took the vestment, and she didn't take it out of the glass case it was in, but it was in a sort of picture frame style case, and she laid it down, and she put some tracing paper over the glass case to trace the floral pattern that was on there along with the cross, so she would know the dimensions when she was making the vestment of how big everything was supposed to be and what it was supposed to look like.
Wait, what's the difference between fiddleback and Roman? Is fiddleback just a little bit?
It's two names for the same thing, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know. Yeah, there's Gothic and.
Well, there's other ones too. There's
Isn't there a Borromeo or Neri?
yes,
St. Philip Neri?
there's a Borromeo and a Philip Neri, and those are like a cross between. Those are both a cross between a Roman and a Gothic.
Okay.
Which I forget which is which, but one looks more Roman and one looks more Gothic, but with elements of the other.
Yeah.
And then there's another cut too called monastic, which has, rather than rounded edges like a Gothic, has more sort of square edges, and then a cowl in the neck. And then there's yet another cut called conical, which is very ancient, but it's essentially a giant cone of fabric.
Okay.
They're very billowy,
Yeah.
a little cumbersome.
Yeah.
I've never celebrated Mass wearing one.
Okay.
But I would think it would be a little difficult.
Yeah. Well, here we've got the altar servers to help lift it at the elevation.
Well,
right?
you understand why that is when you when you wear a conical vestment, why they did those sorts of things. I don't know that we have any here at Saint Agnes, though.
So we've talked a lot about the church side of your work. What I want to go back now to young Paul Baker. And where your vocation started to blossom. What was your family life like growing up? Yeah, take us back.
I remember as a young child being somewhat enamored with the celebration of the Mass. I wasn't one of these kids who constantly played Mass, but I do remember playing it on occasion. And I remember when we switched parishes when I was about 6 or 7 years old, it was something that was rather traumatic to me because I had been accustomed to the only thing I knew, and then we were going somewhere else, and it was something new, and because of that, I didn't like it because it wasn't what I was familiar with. So that was sort of how seriously I took those sorts of things. But I do remember that I was certainly always interested in the truth and what is true. But I wouldn't say that I had, as a child, an overly pious or spiritual life. We went to Mass pretty much every Sunday, and we went to Catholic school, us kids did. Outside of that, I wouldn't say I sought to cultivate any sort of spiritual life as a child. Didn't know what that was. If you had told me, or if you had asked me about it, I wouldn't have known what that was. But when I was in college, I started to get more interested in those matters. Started realizing, well, if I'm going to call myself a Catholic, I should try to live that in an authentic way because, again, I was interested in what was true. And if I'm going to say I am something, well, then I should know what it is I believe and should seek to practice it. So I started getting more interested in that through some of the classes I was taking in college. And I was a geography and history major, so I wasn't studying anything like religion or philosophy on a regular basis. But some of the classes I had taken had touched upon it, and those things started to interest me more and more. And when I got out of college, I started doing some more reading about these things. And I actually started developing a spiritual life, just a life of prayer. And the more I started to do these things, the more I got the sense that I really wanted to pursue the priesthood. And it was just something I couldn't stop thinking about. So I figured, well, I might as well make some inquiries and see where this goes. I didn't think I had any right to be a priest, or I didn't demand to be a priest, but I thought this is a question I have to get answered because the more I study and look into this stuff and the more I pray, the more I want to do this. And I kept knocking on doors, and they kept opening, and they kept telling me what I needed to do, and I kept doing it. And one thing led to another, and here I am, or at least that's the short version of the story.
Yeah.
I think what's important, what I would want to relay from my experience to anyone who's thinking about vocation, is that knowing you have a vocation there's no one moment that confirms for you that you have a vocation. I think so many people think that if they're going to have a vocation to the priesthood or the religious life, there's going to be one aha moment where they realize, yes, this is the confirmation I was looking for. Well, there is a moment like that, but that's when you actually are at your ordination and they tell you to come forward and be ordained.
Right.
But there's no certain way you're supposed to feel emotionally. There's no certain spiritual epiphany you're supposed to have other than you realize or have some sort of idea of what that life is, and you desire to pursue it. And you realize that if it's what God wants, it'll come to pass. And if it isn't, it won't. And, a lot of people get the idea that your vocation is some sort of puzzle that you need to figure out. Well, God doesn't desire to hide your vocation from you. If you seek to live a life of virtue, if you seek what is true, if you seek what is good, if you seek what is beautiful, if you seek a relationship with God in prayer, and especially in the sacraments, confession on a regular basis, and frequent Eucharist, God will allow the desire for you to do what he wants you to do to grow within you without you having to know if there's any sort of way you're supposed to feel in order to pursue something. You'll see the good of what priesthood and or the religious life is, and you'll pursue it. And if God desires it, you'll find it to be a natural fit. And if not, that'll be made known to you in some clear way. And that, without knowing that that was the approach to take, not because I'm so virtuous, that's just sort of what ended up happening for me by the mercy of God. My vocational discernment or journey was not one fraught with a lot of, should I or shouldn't I? I just figured, well, as long as I want to pursue this and as long as they keep wanting me to and are inviting me to, I'm going to keep doing that. And that's not to say that every moment was fun or easy or terribly exciting. But when I thought about, well, what else would I want to do? The answer was nothing. And they seemed to indicate that they wanted me to keep continuing on the path. So I was glad to keep doing so. And I'm glad that I've been doing this as a priest now for the last 8+ years.
As you discern, as you move through the different steps toward the priesthood, is there an affirmation in your heart that the Lord provides, not in a, like you said, not in a particular moment, but
I mean, I would say that it more reveals itself in the practicalities of seminary life.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're doing things in the seminary and just nothing is working out for you, and that could look a lot of different ways. And I don't have the competency to say how that should look because it's different for every man in terms of him working with the formation staff in a seminary setting. But just to say, it's usually pretty clear to the formation staff who this is a good fit for and who it isn't. And they will let that be known to men so that these men can spend their time that God has given them wisely. But I think that's how God reveals it. Not that we shouldn't be attentive to what's going on in our interior life, but that that isn't everything, because that doesn't cut across all things. Because one guy could say, well, he says he feels this way and he wants to do this, but I'm not even sure how I feel. We can over-subjectivize the experience. I think the thing you ask yourself ultimately is, what is the prudent thing to do given the measurable circumstances that I, in conjunction with my formation staff at the seminary or my spiritual director, can ascertain? What's what's prudent given the circumstances of my life and my formation. And then what do I desire? I think a lot of people don't realize that the will of God and your will are not two different things. A lot of people get this idea, well, this is what I want, but what does God want? Well, I might want something that's different than God, especially if that something is, say, sinful. But if I'm seeking to live a life of virtue, if I'm availing myself to the sacramental life of the church, God is going to allow me to recognize and to desire what he wants from me. But ultimately, when it comes to vocation, there is a choice that must be made. The thing I always go back to is when Jesus is in the home of Mary and Martha, and Mary is upset, or Martha is upset with Mary because she hasn't helped. She's just sat there and listened to Jesus. And Jesus says, Martha has chosen the better part. Well, that's the key. She chose it. I think a lot of people don't realize how available so many graces are to them, and so many wonderful ways of life are open to them, but they simply need to be chosen. And I don't think it's any different when it comes to vocation. I mean, our Lord uses the parable of the sower. I think God desires a great many people to be priests and religious, but sometimes for various reasons, people, not due to their fault always, they're not able to sense that. But there is a matter of choosing on the part of the person, on the part of the individual who's not God, to allow that to be realized. So I think that's the other question you ask yourself is, what do I desire? And that doesn't mean always feeling a certain way about something, because feelings can come and go. But looking at the circumstances of your life, as I said, seeing what's prudent, and then making a choice, and then sticking to that choice. Mm-hmm. I think that's the other thing too, is people, when they discern, they think, well, I have to sort of have tried everything before I make a decision. No, you don't. You can see what's prudent to do and then make a decision and go after that. And if it's not what God wants, it will become obvious in some way. And you can possibly live many different lives that are going to be pleasing to God, having chosen any great number of possibility of things.
It's different for everyone. You've said that. When would you say or recommend as a good opportunity for maybe even the students in high school, in general, when would be a good time for individuals to start to really be open to discerning a vocation?
I think it's different for everyone. I think parents should seek to cultivate a disposition within their children to have an openness to doing what God desires in their life, but to realize that that desire isn't often made known through some subjective feeling, but will be made known through the practical circumstances of their life. Mm-hmm. And I would invite parents and teachers to share with students, especially as they get more into their later high school years, and this goes for anything, not just religious life or priesthood, but I see that you've got skills in this area. Had you ever considered pursuing that? And to leave it at that, and to let their own recognition of that good determine whether or not they pursue that.
I think sometimes we get there's like the external pressures too of at a specific time, okay, you're gonna graduate this year, so you got to make up your mind about where you're going to college and are you entering the seminary, and we have those external things that kind of push on us to make up our minds. I mean, how do we recognize those points in life where we have to make the decision while at the same time keeping that openness to God and His will for our lives, aligning our will to His will in that way?
I would say just cultivating a willingness to make a choice And not that needs to happen at any one specific time in one's life, but that you're to also help them realize that your time to make choices on this earth is not unlimited. And that, but also that the choice is yours ultimately. And that what God wants to happen will happen if it will please him to happen. So I don't get too bogged down in there are certain points one has to make a decision by, but I just invite people to do what seems prudent, but also to be decisive at the same time, to realize that things aren't going to become known until you start making some choices about things. And sometimes when you make a choice, it will become very known very soon that path is not the path for you, and then great, then you can go look into something else. But the important thing is to make a choice. I can't say for anybody when that must be by, but just to know that if you don't start making choices, nothing's going to happen. So if you want things to start happening, anything, you have to start moving yourself definitively in one direction or another.
So do you've as a chaplain of our school, work with a lot teaching theology. You work a lot with high schoolers wrestling with some of these big questions. How do you go about explaining not only just how to properly discern your vocation, some of those practical things, but also some of the deeper, bigger questions that they might have regarding things like where they come from, who they're made to be, their purpose in life. How do you tackle some of those questions with high schoolers?
Well, I try to have a ready answer for them when they ask those questions, but I would also hope that the answer I give is just the beginning of their own coming to understand it for themselves in the way that God desires for them to understand it. And that a lot of these questions are going to require a lifelong engagement with it, that this is not a question you just answer once and that you move on. Yes, I can give you an answer of sorts at this time, so you've got something to build on and something to go on. But my hope is that what I would do, because a lot of what they teach, a lot of what I teach, at least many of the technical aspects of what I teach, some of the bigger truths I do believe and I do hope they'll carry forward, but many maybe of the more minute things, or as I said, technical aspects of things, they will in time, many of them, likely forget. But what I want them to take with them is the knowledge that what they received here was just the beginning of the answer, or at least was the invitation to continually engage with this the rest of their life, that God has never answered all the questions, at least for them personally, and how he desires to unfold the mystery of his will in their particular circumstances. So I would hope that my answers would be an invitation to them, certainly to ongoing conversion and then ongoing conversation with God. That you can't come away from here and say, yep, I learned all of it. I don't need to ever pick up any sort of theological idea or text again. That you're just getting the tip of the iceberg. And my hope is that my students come to realize that their engagement with that won't happen just with me, a priest, but in this context of other people who are seeking to engage the same thing. So I think that's one of the real strengths of our school, of what it would teach to impart students. A beautiful example that I saw of this recently, when and there was a slew of grad parties in the spring, of course, and I'm trying to think of how many I went to, probably at least a dozen, if not maybe 15 or more. And there was one young lady's grad party I went to, and she was she was headed to a particular Catholic institution of higher learning after Saint Agnes. And she said, yeah, everybody says that's just Saint Agnes 2.0. And there are many Saint Agnes grads going there. That's why they say that. And she said, but that's what I want. And I thought, I couldn't hear anything better, a stronger advertisement, both for our school and their school. Here's a young lady who recognizes that the engagement in her faith life going forward is going to happen in a community of people who are all seeking this. And, that's something that was inculcated in her here. So that's I think our real strength and what we very much do impart to our students here.
You get to do some kind of fun tasks as well as our chaplain, and that you get to go out to different sporting events and activities and not only be a presence, but I always get goosebumps when I see you out there and you're blessing our students ahead of the game. It's probably kind of cheesy and corny, but it's just cool because, again, I think back to my public school experience, and then that never happened. That would never have happened. And again, this idea that everything that we do here is rooted in our faith. I love that witness that we're able to give. Is it enjoyable for you to be able to provide that witness as well to our students, to be there for them, encouraging them in all that they're doing at the various activities and things that so many of our students partake in?
Well, for me, I would say that it's exciting for me to be a part of the life of the school outside of the school day, especially since, just for myself, to be honest, I wasn't greatly involved in the life of my school outside of the school day. I mean, I did a few things, but not like so many of our students did here. So it's like I get to experience this aspect of high school life that I myself certainly made a conscious choice at that time in my life to not experience. I think part of it was the school I went to was much bigger. That's another thing I love about our school, is that it's not tiny, but at the same time, it's a community where it's small enough that you know everyone. And that doesn't mean like you're extremely close to everyone, because you can only have so many close friends and that sort of thing. But you know who everyone is, and you know what everyone's about, and that's I think adds to that idea of this being a community of faith, and a community of faith even certainly outside of the theology classroom, but even outside of the school day as well. So it's wonderful to get to experience that which I didn't experience, but also in a way that's very healthy, because sometimes outside of the school day, sometimes things can be distorted. And I don't even mean people doing immoral things, but oftentimes schools having maybe an overemphasis on activities outside of the classrooms, or an over-importance of them. But here I think it's balanced so well, in that our students want to do well at these things, as they should, but realize that these are just a part of the picture, and they're put at their proper level of priority.
Right. I just was thinking about, how other schools might want to recruit for certain sports. I guess that might be more applicable in the college sphere, but I was thinking, how
Well, there's certainly private schools that do that.
Okay. How great would it be if you're like, you visit another parish on a Sunday because you want to recruit the best altar server to come here to Saint Agnes. And have you done that, Father? Is there an NIL practice or something with?
No, being good at altar serving is something that any boy can do. You don't need to be a world-class athlete. Any boy who puts his mind to it can be an attentive server who serves the Lord well.
Did you serve as a boy growing up?
I did.
Okay.
But the parish I grew up at, We stopped in 8th grade.
Okay.
So I didn't do it past then. They didn't have high school servers, and it was co-ed servers. And that's another wonderful thing we have here at St. Agnes, is that the students can serve all the way through high school. And even once they're out of high school, even maybe come back and help occasionally, especially for bigger events like processions or Holy Week. But also that it is an all-male activity here at St. Agnes. And that's not meant to exclude girls in any way, but just to show that there is a connection between serving at the altar and the priesthood. And the priesthood, obviously, by the mandate of Christ only being for males, and the server really being an extension of the ministry of the priest, and therefore, more properly speaking, something that is fulfilled by a male. And then also the practical aspect of this being a way for young boys to consider whether or not God might want them to serve in that role of being his priest, standing at the altar, who offers wonderful exposure to that, to bring about that consideration within them. So that's another wonderful thing we have here. And of course, we have at least 100 school servers, and then certainly many servers on the parish side as well, many of whom are our school students, but other boys who are not students at our school, but who also serve here very faithfully and very reverently.
It's always amazing to see especially on the solemnities and the days in which we have all school masses, and then we have a procession, or to see it's like a little army up there on the altar and then processing throughout the church.
Well, that's not by accident. I mean, this army of altar servers is meant to remind us that we are all part of the church militant, the church soldiering, and our campaign is towards the heavenly homeland. And we could easily celebrate Mass without servers. Servers are not absolutely necessary to celebrate a Mass. They're there to help the congregation to be reminded of the fact that they too are part of this army, even though they might not be up there with the little army of servers. And also the example that they so wonderfully set helps bring about within the worshipers at Mass that disposition of Actuosa. Through the reverence they show, this helps people be disposed towards what God desires to bring about in the Mass within them. So they're a wonderful witness for us in that way too.
Do you have a particular routine that you get into on a school day where you eat a specific cereal every morning? Is it like a game day kind of thing?
No, nothing.
Not on Sundays either?
Not really.
Okay.
I typically don't. I usually don't. I don't eat anything before midday.
Okay.
Typically, but if I've got the morning Mass, I'll get up at about 5:30 for Mass at 6:30, and then after Mass, I'll spend some time in prayer in our chapel in the rectory, and then head over to the office to get ready for class that day or whatever else needs doing throughout that particular day.
What we maybe have the misconception as a society that all that our religious orders and priests, all they do is sit and pray, and in your case teach. What are some of the other things that you do for leisure? I know you're a trivia buff. We've talked about that before.
One of the few television programs I watch is Jeopardy.
Okay.
So I try to watch that most days unless I've got an appointment or some other commitment at that time.
Are you going to be on one day? Can we get Ken Jennings to invite you? Maybe
I don't have any reason to think I'll be on there soon someday. I have auditioned for the show before.
No way.
But it's been a while.
That's awesome.
It's been a while since I've done that. I think the last time I auditioned was maybe my second to last year of seminary.
Okay.
Was the last time I did an in-person audition.
You made it. Is that like a stage in the process?
So it's different now, I think. I think now the whole thing's online is the sense that I get.
Oh, okay.
But in the old days, what you used to do was you would take a test online, and this maybe happened once a year. And if you did well on the test, and then amongst those who did well, they didn't tell you whether or not you passed. But if you did well enough on the test and were randomly selected amongst those who did well, you would get invited to an in-person audition. And then there they would give you another test to make sure, because you could have had someone helping you at home, I suppose. And then they would have you play a mock version of the game to see what it would be like if you were on screen. They want to see what your screen presence is like. And then they do a little personality interview. And you're there with a bunch of other people, probably about 20 some other people auditioning. And then they say, after it's done, you won't ever hear if you passed or didn't pass, but just know that we put way more people in the contestant pool than we'll ever need. So if you don't hear back in, I think they said 18 months or something, feel free to try out again. So I think I've did that 4 times.
Wow.
Never heard anything.
Well, but now we got to try again. I mean, it's been 18 months, Father, right?
I think my fastball's lost a little something, so I don't know how it would go.
Is it the timing? Is that like, that would be my thing, would be like, maybe I would know the answer, but there's no way I'd buzz in quick enough to be able to.
I'm maybe not as quick as I used to be, and also I think my knowledge is a lot more specialized than it used to be. So I think there's a combination of factors as to why. I don't know. I think I could go on there and still do all right, but
I think we can make it happen. We get some student support behind you and record some epic video or something to submit along with it, and then
start a letter writing campaign. Yeah.
Ken Jennings, if you're watching.
I'm sure he's one of your first subscribers.
Probably, yes.
No, I remember recently there was someone else. They had a priest on rather recently, actually. He was a religious priest. He was a member of the Holy Cross order. That's the order that runs, or Congregation of the Holy Cross. That's the order that runs Notre Dame University. And yeah, he didn't win. I
think we could get you. I think we got a winner here. Father.
Well, it all depends on so many things.
Yeah. What would be your area of expertise? I mean, obviously church history, maybe church history, church.
I do tend to know the church stuff pretty well, but that would be the embarrassing thing. If there was a Bible category and I didn't get them all, it would look really bad.
Yeah, it's a risk. It's a risk you have to take, right?
It is. So, but geography and history, which were my majors in college, would be my strongest areas.
Mm-hmm.
My weakest area would probably be popular music and television.
Our students can help you with that, right?
I suppose they could.
They could give you the lessons. We can do some tutoring after school.
I'm very teachable. I remember Father Moriarty told that to me, that I was very teachable.
Oh.
So I'm willing to learn, but probably not willing to watch and listen to a lot of that stuff.
I don't blame you on that. I don't blame you one bit. No.
I just don't have the time, if nothing else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, your schedule is booked between everything that you're doing at the parish and at the school. But you did take some time this summer. Did you go on a couple trips or one trip? You've done some traveling, right? Yes,
I've been fortunate in my priesthood to have taken some trips. I've not ever done a official pilgrimage where I've led a group from a parish, although that was true until this spring when I don't like to say I led it because I really didn't have to do too much, but I went with our students, our juniors and seniors, 42 of them, with many other very good members of our faculty and a faculty spouse to Rome this past March. So that was the first organized pilgrimage I've ever done as a priest. And that was a tremendous experience. It was spiritually nourishing and very impactful for our students, I could see. So, and it helped because I think our students, not because of much that I did, were well prepared to enter into that experience with the right mindset that this is not a vacation, that this is a pilgrimage. A tourist, a vacationer makes demands, a pilgrim gives thanks. And the students approached it very much with that attitude. So that was wonderful to see, and to see how much they took from that experience. So, no, it was wonderful. I'd love to do one of those again at some point. When, I'm not sure. I'll let Father Ubel have the next one. He's got a forte for planning these sorts of things, so I'll let him run wild on that. I'm more than happy to do that. So that was a wonderful experience. But then I took a couple personal trips this summer. I took a road trip through the American South with a friend from Louisiana. So we drove through Mississippi, Tennessee, and Georgia, saw some Civil War battlefields, visited a couple of cathedrals in Jackson, Mississippi, and in Atlanta, and just stopped at other little interesting places along the way, things like roadside eateries and whatnot. The South is certainly, I would say, it's the part of America that's the most America. There's nothing else quite like it. A lot of Midwestern stuff you could somehow see as maybe being in Europe or just sort of Europe transplanted, but the South is the South.
Did you pick up an accent?
No, I don't think so.
A little Southern drawl, Georgia.
I wasn't there. Well, part of it too was you'd go to some of these areas and it was the definition of sleepy.
Oh,
One of
really?
the towns I went to in Mississippi was called Vicksburg, where they fought a major Civil War battle. And the way I described it was like a sleepier, more rundown version of Stillwater. Very interesting, very, very hospitable, and I have nothing bad to say about it at all. But it was weird because it didn't seem like it was depressed, but just no one was around. And I don't know if it's just everyone was inside because it's so hot or or what, but it was a wonderful trip and wonderful places that I saw along the way. And then in July, I took a trip to Switzerland, and I saw some church things while I was there, among other things, both natural beauty and ecclesial beauty. So I was fortunate to go to a Benedictine abbey there called Einsiedeln, which is the name of the town the abbey's in. I'm not sure if the town is named after the abbey or the abbey after the town. It's a very old abbey. The current church isn't as old as the abbey is, but probably a Baroque church, Baroque era church is there. And beautiful church, and was able to pray there. They had an adoration chapel in the crypt, and then stayed to pray Vespers with the monks at 4:30 in the afternoon. And then after Vespers, they sang a very beautiful version of the Salve Regina that this abbey is famous for. Oh. They sing it there and have since the time of the Reformation. So that was a very spiritually uplifting place to be. So no, I've been fortunate to be able to take some trips. Last summer, so summer of 24, I did a personal pilgrimage of sorts to England and went and saw many cathedrals there, most of which had been formerly Catholic cathedrals or churches that are now part of the Church of England, but was able to see those, at some of which there are Catholic saints buried. So I was fortunate to be able to go to the cathedral in the city of Durham, which is in the far north of England. And there are buried two famous saints, St. Bede the Venerable, who is the father of English history, and St. Cuthbert, who was a monk and bishop of Lindisfarne, which was an island off the coast of England that the Vikings raided. So to keep his relics safe, the monks moved his body from there to what's now Durham Cathedral. So it was wonderful to go there and to pray at those tombs and to see those churches. And another exciting thing I'm hoping will happen this spring break is that Dr. Faith Paul is hoping to lead a pilgrimage to that area of England as well as Scotland to see some of these sites that I saw. I did not inspire her to do this, but she had done a fellowship of sorts some years back and had visited a lot of these places. So she was keen to share this experience with some of our students. So I would hope to go on that as well too.
What would you say is the importance of, I mean, I'm recognizing in myself now, having been here for a few years, and I work here. This is our parish as a family. I'm recognizing the importance of taking time away, some vacation time. What's the value in taking time away from your work to rest, to have leisure? And then also maybe how important is it to distinguish a vacation versus a pilgrimage?
No, those are good questions. I think first of all, we would say it's good to take time away because our Lord himself sets that example. There are various times in which he goes away from the crowd to either just spend time with his apostles or closer disciples. And then times he's just off by himself, usually to go pray. So one thing I'm always cognizant of, even with planning some trips, is always to make sure I do an annual retreat. So I was also able to have that happen this summer. For the last 3 years now, there's a Carmelite monastery near Green Bay in Wisconsin called the Monastery of the Holy Name, near a little town called Denmark, and been able to take a retreat there. They've got a couple hermitages there for priests to use for that purpose, and that's been a wonderful place. It's very close to the shrine of Our Lady of Champion. So I've also been able to visit that shrine when I go out there, and that's a very prayerful place for me, and a place where I've really felt the presence of Our Lady. So a wonderful place to visit if you've not been. But to distinguish, between all those things, I would say certainly the retreat you want to prioritize, because the church does set aside time for us to do that outside of time that she would give us as vacation. So that's her way of saying that this is an important thing to do, and I think an important thing to do to stay grounded in your mission as a priest, to remind yourself why allow God to remind you during this time and to give you the strength to live this life. But then I would say in terms of a pilgrimage versus a vacation, many of the vacations I've gone on have had pilgrim-like elements, but they're not wholly focused on that. There are other things I do that aren't directed towards seeing these sites. So I would say a pilgrimage is really almost exclusively focused on those sorts of things. Not to the exclusion of anything else that's enjoyable or fun, certainly, but that's what you're doing every day is something related to holy sites or holy places. Whereas many of these trips I've taken, I take the time to see these sorts of things because I'm interested in them, but I take just as much or even more time to see other things that I'd like to see. And that's important to do too, just to have recreation, certainly everything done for the glory of God and to offer back to him, but not as focused a way or in a way that where there are other very present motivations as well, which are not bad because we have this need for recreation as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Last question. How do you feel that the Lord has made Saint Agnes a home for you? Obviously, as a priest, you can be you can be assigned anywhere at any time. You never know exactly where the Lord might be calling you, but particularly as a parochial vicar, what are the ways in which you now feel, hopefully, that St. Agnes is a home for you?
I would say one thing that sticks out is, and this has been true everywhere I've gone, I've felt at home at every assignment that I've had as a priest, thanks be to God. I know every priest can't say that. So I'm glad it's been the case in my priesthood that I've felt that wherever I've gone. I'll just start by saying. But a way that I've seen it here and other places too is the amount of appreciation that people have shown for my presence. And I think what really stands out about St. Agnes, and this is not to say this wasn't true at other places, but what really is distinct about here is the level of appreciation I have seen from our students, both in the lower and the upper school. Before many of them even knew who I was or really even knew me, they were already showing this to me. And that is what I immediately saw as being distinct about this place, is that they were very ready to welcome a newcomer. Now, obviously, a very visible newcomer whose role is pretty well known already, even though they don't know me yet. But they didn't have to do that, and yet they did. So from the very earliest moments, especially once the school year started, I very much felt welcomed and appreciated, especially by our students here at the school. And also a lot of the faculty here at the school, too. We've got a tremendous faculty here. All these people are seeking to serve our students well and seeking to help our students grow in virtue. And that's been so evident to me as well, too, that these people are really my collaborators. You know, these aren't just co-workers. These are people whom I share a project with. And as demanding as this assignment has been, it makes it all worthwhile because I know that everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction. And that makes it worth doing what I'm doing. And it makes the challenge worth it. So that's how I would say I've felt at home here, is that the people here make me want to pour myself out.
Well, the next time that we have you on, you will have been a Jeopardy champion.
Oh, yes.
No, thanks so much for taking the time to chat, Father, and
all the best to your project here at Saint Agnes Studios.
Yeah, thanks.